things. So, hello and welcome to the New Gig Podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Hodgson, and today I'm delighted to be joined by remote work advocate, entrepreneur, and author, Nadia Harris. How are you doing, Nadia?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for the invitation. Really appreciate it.
It's fantastic to have you on. And, let's rewind, go back to the start a little bit here, and just give us a little bit about your background and also a little bit about the journey that you've been taking.
Okay, it's a long journey. I'll try to make it really concise. So to begin with, I am a third culture child, meaning that I was born in one country, lived there for a while, then moved to another one. My parents are also from different, I would say, cultural backgrounds, and I've lived in multiple countries and I also speak multiple languages. And that I think has always been a part of me, which I wasn't aware of that much when I was younger, when I was a teenager. But something was always not right. I always thought that, I could go beyond and I wanted to be everywhere. I never felt 100% like I should stick into one being in one place. And so, of course, when I then years later graduated and I already had a profession, I graduated from law school. I was at that time, that was over 10 years ago, tailored to one fixed location. Like you have to be there, you have to work like this, right? And I thought, this is not what I want. I feel like I can, broaden my horizons, work with different cultures here, there, and everything. And I dropped everything, burned all bridges. It's not recommended to anyone by all means. Don't do it unless you're absolutely out of your mind, like me. Okay, no judgment. Moved overseas, started a completely different career, got my first remote job that was also in a different country by accident, by the way, or accident, coincidence, or fate, I would say today.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, and I saw that it's possible, to be on one continent and then to work on another one, and then step by step working this way across the globe with all countries already within the HR industry, later on within the talent acquisition industry, helping people relocate, move from country to country. I would say design operations models for companies, and then also combining this with the legal perspective that came back because I used to specialize in local employment law. Step by step, I found like, hey, with the rise of remote work, with the rise of the gig economy, this is my place to really make a difference. And that's where I am today, working. I'm all over the place sometimes. Sometimes people ask me, where are you? I'm like, oh, I'm really not sure where I am today, but doesn't really matter. So that's what it is.
And I like the fact that you can actually, work from anywhere. You can deliver value. You can work on projects from different locations as well. And when was there a tipping point or a eureka moment when you thought, I'm just not doing this 9 to 5 anymore? You talked a little bit there about the fact that you realized there was something more. When did you have the sort of the guts or the foresight to actually make that leap?
So it was in 2015 when I moved to the States from Europe, and I got a really good job in a really good renowned corporation, which really was a great job. But I thought at that stage that this was what I needed. That was the change that I needed, driving down the highway, to this stable corporate, big deal, well paid at that time and everything. And the hype was there for a couple of weeks until I faced the same issue as before, that I need to clock in at 7:59, clock out at 5:01. I need to take a break when I'm told to take a break. I can drink coffee when it's accepted to drink coffee. You're not supposed to do it if you're not on a break. And then I remember after a couple of weeks and months, I was going to the bathroom multiple times because then nobody would, question why are you moving back and forth, because I couldn't keep sitting like this, in a
Yeah.
cubicle all the time. So I was like back and forth, back and forth. I was standing there looking in the mirror and thinking, girl, what do you want in life? Something's wrong with you. You moved, you have this great thing, people dream about it. What the hell is wrong? And I was so unhappy with myself, so frustrated, because I changed everything. I burned all bridges, as I told you, and I
Mm.
was standing there and thinking, I am not happy. I can't keep working like this because I am going to get absolutely crazy. And that was, well, 10 years ago at that stage, right?
Yeah.
Remote and the gig economy wasn't that popular. So I was actually thinking something was wrong with me. Or it turns out later, years later, that nothing was wrong with me. I just didn't have that mindset. And then the remote job and everything, all these gigs that I started having, well, that probably must have been fate, just like you underlined already.
I think it is, Nadia. I mean, we do get these rainbows in life, things that look beautiful from a distance, and when we get
Yeah.
close to them, they disappear. And it sounds like that was one of those moments that you discovered in your life that everything that was set out wasn't really the fantastic dream that you thought it was. But I think also your reaction is quite normal. At first, you look to yourself and think, "What's wrong with me? I've got this
Mhm.
great situation, well paid, all the status. I should be happy. This should be the definition of making it." When the reality is something else, you have to look for your internal fulfillment.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I seriously, I remember the moment. I remember the joy inside me when I bought my car and I was driving down the highway. It was my American dream. You know what I mean? At that moment, I saw all the cars driving as well, and I was part of that as well, right? It was so amazing. Like I made it. She left on a one-way ticket. It was a one-way ticket, okay, and
Yeah,
almost no savings. Seriously, no kidding. And I got this job within a week, and
yeah,
there I was. Hello, yeah, and then I was like, oh, you see, you thought something was wrong with me, but I got you here, right? And
yeah.
then weeks later, months later, I was so unhappy, exactly just the way that you're saying. But I don't think it was very easy to figure out in the beginning what was actually wrong because
Mm,
I think for me, the point was when I was already standing there, I was already doing this. I mean, standing there, looking in the mirror, exactly like, what the hell? And I was thinking, that's it. That's it. So now, to the rest of your life, you will be driving the same way, or you change, you make a switch, you go to a different corporation, and you'll still be home at 5:30 every single day, and then you'll be waiting for a vacation to go somewhere for a week or two if you get lucky, because in the US, of course, vacation is an employee perk. It's not given
yeah,
by law in Europe.
yeah,
And that's it, right? And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I don't want to live like this. I don't know what I want, but I know what I don't want.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you have not just your own story, but you have much more exposure to, a global audience. And do you see over recent months and years that there's more and more people who are having this same eureka moment like you had, and really sort of adapting and opting for something different? They want to have more. We say work-life balance, but they want more of a work style which is more in tune with their needs and their wants and their personal passions, as opposed to finding a job which is a 9 to 5, something you go to and you sell your hours to one employer, and if you're lucky, you get 2 weeks holiday. Is there, more people reacting against that, not sort of signing up to that contract, realizing there's more to life?
Definitely, yes. So the first thing that I would stress is today everything is about the experience, right? And so
Okay.
people start seeing, because of the fact that there is so much information being spread globally, that it can be done differently. Of course, the pandemic has kind of, I don't want to say broadened horizons because I go too far, because it was treated
Yes.
as an emergency solution, but still that things can be done differently. And also one more thing, I think that many people started to realize that they were actually fooled by a system, since there were children. And I wrote an article about it a while ago because I was thinking about it for a very long time. All of us, imagine you're a child, you're watching a cartoon, and there you have the father driving to his big office,
Yeah.
because he makes money, he's very successful, he's wearing, a suit, and he's, there, of course. Then he gets promoted, then the child gets some toys, then this father moves up and lives sorry, and works on a higher floor, and then they change the house, and this and everything step by step. And then then you watch a movie when you're a teenager, like me, for example, right? At that time everyone went through this, and you see that, yeah, it's about moving to this big city, working in a skyscraper, taking the subway, and subconsciously it keeps feeding you information what success means. And
Yeah.
the thing is that we never take a moment to stop and give it a thought like, does this really makes me happy? Does that really make sense? Because, from a historic perspective, even if you evaluate why skyscrapers were built in the first place, okay, what the mass migrations were in the 19th century and why we have the population, so to say, condensed in a certain area or areas, big cities, then it is justified something that happened during the Industrial Revolution. But today times have changed and we were blindly just following a pattern. Yeah, this is success. This is what you do. This is the ladder you climb. But
Yeah.
then there was a clash a couple of years ago, and also with younger generations being born, obviously in different circumstances, thinking like that doesn't really make sense in today's, era that is surrounded heavily with technology, right? That
Yeah.
we use on a daily basis. So that's my observation.
And how are companies and organizations specifically, how are they adapting to these new demands, the requirements of more flexibility, more openness, the I'd say almost the embarrassment of new technologies, which make these things so much easier, that remote work and hybrid work is possible for pretty much anyone. Of course, there's certain roles that have to be done on site, but there's so much more, particularly in the knowledge worker space, so much that can be done remotely. Is there still a big pushback, are you finding?
This is also a very good question. So we see the pushback in the media because apparently it makes sense to publish this, whereas it's not really true. Because if you look at everything that's happening at scale, it actually personally makes me sad and it hurts me. And I take it very personally that all these amazing companies that actually, foster flexible working arrangements, they don't scream about it everywhere, but there are so many of them, right? We
Yeah.
always just hear the dramatic examples because this is also what sells, and those are all click bites, right?
Mm.
And that obviously brainwashes masses of people like, oh, yeah, back to the office. I'm like, well, no, that's not really the case. So, well, there is a fight going on, of course, but when you go through changes in every phase of your life, but also when we look again at it from a historic perspective, change is part of the process. So that doesn't worry me at all. We just have to swallow it. It is what it is. But now when we look at the implementation of remote and hybrid working and flexible working, so I would say there are two approaches. The first approach, which I absolutely don't recommend to anyone, is called we'll work it out. Yes, we allow you to do it your way. And then your way means no way. Chaos, nobody knows what's going on,
Yeah.
no performance tracking. And I don't mean presence tracking by all means, performance, goals, nothing. And then suddenly, oh, it's not working. We don't know what's going on. Of course, it's not working because no one knows what to do, right? And it's a completely different setup. It's very intentional. And also, you can see all the, I would say, challenges when everything is remote or hybrid, which you weren't able to see in the office because of the fact that, social interactions, this and
Yeah.
that, these things just get hidden somewhere. And there are obviously also these, I would say, more mature companies that definitely invest in leadership training. They are also very proactive and they understand that they need to adjust their pay policies. They start hiring. I think that still what needs to be clarified is the fact that remote or hybrid doesn't mean that you basically allow the people to work from home, either within a certain country or within a certain city, even when we talk about hybrid arrangements, but it's actually the ability to hire talent globally, right? And this is how we should understand remote, and this is how we should understand flexible working as well. What is interesting, companies tend to tailor both hybrid and remote working into the same basket as diversity and inclusion, which
Mm.
I totally understand because these things are very close. And that's the way it should be promoted. So I think that there's still a lot of work to do. Well, but it's part of the journey. What can I say?
It is part of the journey, but I think this is a very important point that you raised there as well, Nadia. This idea that diversity inclusion is not just on the basis of sex, religion. It's how, when, and where to work to get the most out of your individuals, your team, whether it's full-time employees, whether it's contractors, open talent. I think this is absolutely crucial to be able to look at this this role through that kind of lens. but also for companies and organizations to have this open talent model as well, a freelancer strategy, a remote work strategy. As you say, if it's not done properly, it's bound to be a complete mess because of the fact that people haven't thought it through, or maybe they don't believe in it properly. They just do it because they think it's something that's being required. And of course, these things are always exposed pretty quickly if it's just window dressing as opposed to something that's fundamental and integrated into the workings of the organization.
Of course, 100%. So, I mean, you of course see this, oh, others do it, so I'll do it too.
Yeah,
And I think, okay, evaluate what's your business case? Like, how does it add value? What's your long-term talent
yeah,
strategy, for example? In terms of, there are a few things that I could never understand. And I don't know, maybe some of our listeners or watchers will know. If anyone knows, please reach out to me because I'm literally dying to find out. How is it, seriously, how is it that most of the companies today, when we look at the growth of the e-commerce industry, the service industry in general, they usually service clients or customers from the distance, right? So they're able
yeah,
to build a brand, they're able to build great presence, they're able to, grow and, grow their revenues as well. But at the same time, so externally, everything is possible, but internally, come to the office. Like, that just doesn't make sense. So you're able to design all your processes, a connection with your brand, right?
yeah.
Everything you're able to do it, but you can't do it internally for whatever reason. I mean, it's just it's there's no logic behind it. You know what I mean? And so that's now also referring to your question. Of course, it has to be very intentional. Now, when I look at companies, from this perspective, that I sometimes look at smaller companies that want to outsource their services, and there are these huge costs of external agencies very often. And I say, why would you do that? Get into these long-term fixed agreements, whereas you can really find great people that are freelancers who will do an even better job, who will be a kind of extension of your team. They also won't be a fixed cost. You will hire them on demand. And I mean, I think it's just a very agile business strategy from a company's perspective, but for individuals, it's a great way to monetize their skills, because we are entering an era when we're talking about the skill set. What's your added value? What can you do? Rather than, oh, this is my role. It's not about the role, it's about your output and what you bring to the table.
Yeah, completely. And Nadia, you're a lawyer. So what are the legal impediments to this? I mean, we look at this from sort of the angle of, different countries, particularly here in Europe, have different jurisdictions, different requirements. Are there legal impediments to remote work, hybrid work, and freelancer strategies? Because it seems to be the legal departments and HR departments of companies and organizations seem to get cold feet sometimes with this. They feel that they're not going to be compliant, or there's going to be issues with taking part in this kind of arrangement. How does it look?
Yeah, it looks this way. This is how it looks. Now let me describe the back end, okay? So, yeah, of course. I mean, in Europe, we also, we had the work-life balance directive a couple of years ago that has been implemented in EU member states as well. And that has, in many countries, led to some significant changes in terms of implementing the concept of remote working. Of course, within a limited scope, because it's still not for everyone, but at least it has been acknowledged. And in many jurisdictions, it is now part of these jurisdictions and employment laws, which is great, right? And that's like a huge step, and I really like it. But then again, we are looking at it from a local perspective. Now, when we look at it from a global perspective, of course, we have the US, we have Canada, and so on, but that's a completely different story. I don't know. I mean, to a certain extent, I kind of also know what's happening in other parts of the world, but let's focus on Europe maybe at this stage.
Yeah.
And so now when we talk about remote, mostly it's okay, there is a remote working arrangement to a certain extent, so people can work from home. That's still the way it's understood in certain circumstances. And some countries even guarantee this by law. If you fall into a certain category, then your employer basically has to allow you to work from home, unless there is a different, I would say, business requirement, of course. And that's why some roles always will have to be in the office. That makes absolute sense, as you already said it. Now here, the big question happens when we talk about hiring people in different countries. And of course, we see a huge rise of employers of record,
Yeah.
which is very good, but then not always 100% compliant. And that is a different story that I could elaborate on massively, but that would be a different topic. But then an alternative to this, which very few know, is the concept of a foreign employer. And I happen to work with many companies that actually hire people this way. So they have an entity in a certain country, but they hire people in another country because of the concept of the foreign employer, right? And then it's fully compliant and it can be done, right? So if we're insisting on employment laws. Now, when we talk about freelancing, then of course the big topic is employment misclassification. And in some countries, I would say both legal and HR departments are absolutely obsessed to an extent that whenever you start the discussion, it's like there's a big wall in front of you and don't even try. Where again, I think it's not justified because of many reasons, because, well, there is no one size fits all to employment misclassification to begin with. And there is different criteria that you have to consider. So it's not like you fulfill one and oh, it's the end of the world. Definitely not. It also depends what circumstances we are dealing with a freelancer. If this is the only client or if there are multiple clients, for example, right? It also depends if they have their own entity sometimes, or if they want to be hired as a freelancer only. In some countries, you have to have like your own company, your own small business. In other countries, you don't. So this is also very interesting. And now I would say the biggest one that I am tackling these days is the concept of the workation, meaning that employees based on employment contracts are able to work from a different country for a few weeks or for a few months. Legally, when you check, when you go to a certain labor code, it's not going to be documented there by all means. And this is why most legal and HR departments say, this is illegal. This is not illegal, for heaven's sake. I will have to repeat myself like over and over again. Because it is all about evaluating international, both local and the laws within the country where you're planning potentially to allow your people to work from. So it's tax laws, international tax agreements, social security laws, employment laws, and definitely there's always a risk, but you also have a risk when your employee works from home and I don't know, they break their spine, right? Hopefully never happens, but you're still going to have a problem, right? So I mean, there's
Yeah.
always this 1% when you're dealing with people, but it is not illegal. And I think it's about broadening knowledge. Today, not everything is regulated, but what is not 100% regulated yet doesn't mean it's illegal. Okay. And that's what
Yeah.
I'd like to stress.
Yeah. I think this is reticence because it is new, not to be overstepping the mark, and therefore always erring on the side of caution seems to be the starting point. I guess particularly with legal departments and HR departments that often aren't the most creative, shall we say, maybe aren't the most forward looking, that it's always risk averse and taking the steps that are maybe a little bit more reactive. But of course, I think that, as you say there, with the element of education and understanding, this can make these things seem less scary and also more commonplace.
Yeah, it's easier sometimes for them to say no just because they don't know it. But again, when I look at it from a financial perspective very often, and I mean, it's going to be harsh what I'm going to say now, but sometimes it's this case that, of course, companies have to follow local employment laws. And we know that in some countries, the protection based on employment laws towards the employee is very high, meaning you have the severance, you have the termination notices, you can't
Right.
always fire someone. Why am I talking about this? Because of course, within the past few years, we've experienced this within the tech industry massively. And I happen to work with these companies, so I know what they're going through. So then at the end of the day, if you know you have a tiny risk always, okay, of hiring someone either in another country, but even hiring someone as a freelancer, you can also hire someone through a platform. Then you're not
Mm,
even hiring an individual to begin with. You can also do that, by the way.
yeah.
Then your risk of misclassification, I don't want to say doesn't exist, but I mean, is very low if you do it properly, depending also whom you address. But then if you have a team member that you know that your, for example, financial liquidity is at risk, then from a scaling perspective, it just doesn't make sense, because now when, I participate with finance departments and all these cost evaluations, and I see that when the moment comes and we're talking about employment termination in 1 month, I know it costs us sometimes 6 or 7 months more. So then when you look at it from a financial perspective, it just doesn't make sense. Plus, let's look at fixed costs. Let's look at optimizing these costs as well. Plus, actually hiring the people who have the knowledge, have the skills, and they're able to very often bring to the table so many experiences and examples from other companies as well. So I think it's part of the sharing economy to have this approach. Like, why reinvent the wheel? You know what I mean? It's just a smart approach.
Completely. It really is a smart approach. And, you think as we sort of look into the future now, that more companies and organizations will understand this, because there's obviously the need from a corporate perspective, as there is a requirement from the open talent that exists today, that there will be more of a shift towards that. And almost the companies will be forced to open their eyes and adapt much more quickly if they want to hire the talent and skills and expertise that they require.
No offense to anyone, but the word corporate means slow. Okay. So that's the way it is. And no offense again, not meaning to insult anyone here, but I mean, it's a fact. That's all I can say in most cases, right? So the processes have to change after the mindset changes and also after the horizons are broadened, right? So I think that first, people need to get out of their comfort zones. I think connect more with other companies, connect more by attending, I don't know, events, reading, educating themselves to understand that the market value of the people changes based on their skills today and based on, I remember it was really perceived really negatively a few years ago, at least from my perspective. I heard many times, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 years ago, that I was doing multiple things. Focus on one thing, you're not being serious. Who invented this nonsense? Because of the fact that I knew so many things, I can easily, you see, kind of combine all this and connect the dots properly, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that yes, the shift is definitely happening. We see global statistics. When we look at the statistics of the gig economy, when we look at how the platforms that offer where freelancers can advertise themselves, so to say, how that grows. When we look at the ratings of the clients, when we look at people building their personal brands, it's
Mm.
happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is, there's something that's actually happening, and everyone wins by harnessing this through the technology, efficiency costs, productivity costs, and also happiness for individuals. And maybe just as a last point, Nadia, you're very skilled on this. You've got a great online presence and have built a great profile for yourself. What are kind of the top tips you'd give to freelancers, contractors who want to build their profile in the online and offline space?
I'm going to be harsh again right now. So, sorry, but I will be very direct. Nobody is coming to save you. Okay? If you don't do it, nobody's going to be doing it for you. Nothing is going to happen overnight like magic, that someone will find you and say, hey, here's $1 million. You can work here and there, whatever, because we know you're great. If you don't have any exposure, you don't present yourself in a certain way, no one will have the time to think that maybe you know something or you're skilled at something, because people can read your minds. Of course, they cannot. So today, it's all about really creating this awareness. I think what is very important, it's also integrity, that whatever you present, whatever you express, it's actually you. And it's also about being authentic. You see, it's this way that today, what happens online is we can practically sell everything. I could write the craziest profile that I did, I don't know what, but it may not be true. And that will be verified very quickly. And so definitely keep that in mind. And I would say, keep working hard on yourself. Try to find out what your skills are, like what you bring to the table, like why should somebody hire you? what value are you adding? If you switch places with that company, why would it be you, not someone else? Always try to think this way. And also from a freelance perspective, just a few final words. It's also not something that happens overnight. I remember when I was 14 years ago, started working at Upwork. No kidding, maybe 14, maybe a little bit too much, but approximately 10,
Yeah.
11, 12 years ago, something like that, these platforms, similar platforms as well. I started with gigs for, I don't know, $10,
Right.
to build my presence, to build my profile, to get the rating. So it's not this way that you will build a profile and tomorrow everything will change. It's a lot of hard work, doing lots of things for free. When I started doing my videos, my articles, nobody sponsored them in the beginning. Nobody paid for this. I was sitting at night and writing all this myself. So
Mm.
you have to give something in first and then expect a return of your investment. It's like this everywhere. So you also have to have a specific mindset, an entrepreneurial mindset, and just be ready to keep pushing until it works out. And it will.
Exactly. Fantastic words of advice. Nadia, this is really fantastic to be able to have the opportunity to speak with you, hear your thoughts, but also learn about what's happening in the world of work today and also what's coming up into the future. So really appreciate the time and looking forward to future conversations because we will not be short of material or subjects, topics to be able to treat together, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's been a great pleasure. And well, hopefully that adds value for your listeners and watchers.
Absolutely.